Hey everyone, Brian and Austin here again to discuss what happened at the Video Game Awards last night.
Yep, hello everybody.
And I'm wondering, I don't think you actually saw them, did you?
Nope, I was busy I was hanging out with friends doing a stream, and I said, video games are nice, but sometimes it's good to just have a social fun time. And so I dealt with the announcements after the fact, and also, historically, the Video Game Awards, or whatever they've been called, have not been the most, I don't know, enjoyable thing to watch. It depends on the year, I suppose, but I figured I could just get the announcements without all of the awards part, and that would be how I would do it.
Right. I kind of agree with you that the show hasn't been good in
It's
past years, but
terrible.
especially last year.
Last year was really bad.
Yeah.
And I don't know how good the awards this year were. It doesn't, it doesn't pertain to me really at all, but the announcements surprised me.
Yeah, and I will just say quickly that I do think that this was the best show they put on since the beginning of this award show. It did go like 3 hours long or something, and that was a little bit too much.
It's a weird thing with video game award shows because the categories are so weird to me. Like compared to award shows for like other mediums, it's like really weird. They have, I don't know what categories they had, this year, but they'll have categories like the Indie Game Award, but then they don't really define what that means. So you've got some games that people would and wouldn't qualify as indie, or they have like best like Wii U game as opposed to, I don't know. Let's not get into award show stuff. Let's talk about announcements instead.
Yeah, we could talk about Nintendo since that's mainly what we're here to talk about.
Exactly. Yeah, I could go for hours about how strange that award show seems to me. But
yeah, but Nintendo did have a really big presence at this year's.
A surprisingly big presence.
Yeah, it was very strange because they've never shown this much content before.
Not even close, and I don't think anyone expected that they would at an event like this, but I think it's good that they did.
Yep, Reggie showed up like 3 times. Koji Kondo was there for some performances.
He was. Yeah, it was really good. It was good to see them all out there. I mean, it's nice to see what Nintendo does when they are kind of like losing, because they work really hard when they start to get sort of behind the competition, and that's really fun to watch as sort of a fanatic of their company.
Yeah, but let's just talk about the big game now,
Sure.
And that was obviously Zelda.
Yes, they showed
and that was
Zelda.
A monstrous surprise. They were basically teasing it throughout the entire night. Jeff Keighley was basically saying, "Oh, you're not going to want to miss this," and
right.
blah blah blah.
It was
throughout the whole show.
I mean, it was one of those things that if I was joking with my friends, I would have said, "Oh, well, in a crazy dream world, they're going to show new Zelda gameplay at the Video Game Awards," and it would be a joke. But then it wasn't a joke, and they actually did it.
Yeah, and it was very surprising that it was there because in a recent interview in Famitsu, Eiji Aonuma basically said that we won't be seeing it until E3.
Right, and that was the other thing, because specifically, and I don't think any of us thought it was far enough along to show gameplay before next E3 anyway, based on what we saw last E3. Because last E3, it was really choreographed, right? It was a specific sort of, effectively a cutscene that we got to watch. So I didn't think they would have anything like what they had ready this soon. I thought we'd definitely be waiting until E3 at the earliest.
Yeah, but it was shown, and it looked pretty darn good, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it looked, I think still for me, the most promising thing about the Wii U Zelda is not what we've seen, but just the pedigree of its EAD Tokyo 547, I don't know which one it is. But just the pedigree of that development team is still the most, I guess, reliable way of measuring how good the game's going to be, because what we got from the Spike Game Awards, what do they call it? Is it just the Game Awards now?
Yeah, they cut off the attachment to Spike.
Which was a good idea.
Yeah.
That was a smart decision. So what we got from the Game Awards, really, the only sort of revelation we had from that in terms of the game itself, like the content of the game, is, the art style, I think, for me. They seem to have a good grasp on how they want the game to look. And aside from that, everything that was seen was kind of like, well, this could be fine. They could nail this, or it could just be, it could be incidental to the actual overall quality of the game. Namely, I'm sort of subtly referring to the size of the world, which seems very large from what we saw. And it's one of those things where they show the map and then they like zoomed out and everyone was like, whoa. And then they zoomed out again and everyone was like, what? Because it was like a really huge world. And that's one of those things that I think it's worth, if it was anyone aside from EAD Tokyo, it's worth being skeptical about that, because we've seen countless games that have had comparably sized worlds that weren't interesting. So, but the fact that we know it's coming from EAD and it's got that big world really is like exciting. You know what I mean? Because I don't think they would mess that up in a way. And to have someone do it the way that I think they would is that's really, really exciting to me.
Yeah, and I just kind of like how the world actually looks, like the terrain and everything. Like it's curvy in some areas, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
think
just flat.
it looks more thought out than what you'll find. And I'm not one to knock into, especially the Rockstar open world games, but even like the Bethesda ones. Those are really strong games, but architecturally, like the world is kind of seems like they just took a really big brush in some areas and just sort of like put a bunch of terrain. This, from what we saw, especially at the beginning, standing up on that mountain, it looks really, really designed, as opposed to just sort of like throw a bunch of crap down and take the forest brush and paint a bunch of trees here, take the mountain, go download our mountain asset and plop the mountain in here. You know, it didn't feel like that looking at the size, or not the size, but rather just the design of the world. So that is also, you're right, that's really exciting.
What do you think of the actual graphics? Because I've seen some mixed things about it.
You can't really judge it based on that video. It's it looks, there are moments where it looks gorgeous, like the more colorful moments, and a lot of moments where it just looks kind of like a game, you know. But it's an off-screen recording of a video from a live stream of a game that's not done. So there's a lot of qualifiers on that. So
yeah, I wasn't too sure why Nintendo had an off-screen video. I mean, I'm sure they had their reasons.
Maybe because it doesn't look that good up close. So they want to wait until they can make it look good before they put out like a direct feed footage. Because there are moments where you can tell some of the, I mean, and again, this is not something that I personally think matters at all. But in terms of perception, there were moments where you could tell that some of the textures were a little bit ugly. And the world, there are moments where like the world around the horse as they're riding around looks just like a little bit unfinished, kind of empty, and there's no music playing, so you don't really have the benefit of that filling in sort of that emptiness. So there are small little graphical things that maybe they just wanted to sort of cover up, even though they've been good about not shying away from that in the past. But yeah, maybe they just decided that at a show like the Video Game Awards, people tend to be so hyper-focused on a particular set of technical details that they didn't want to reveal all of these things that might give off of a bad impression when they will have those things fixed, you know, by the time it releases. That would be my guess, anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, the two major complaints I've seen thus far are some of like the textures and whatnot, so some of the graphics, and that the overworld looks somewhat barren right now.
The barren overworld is more of a, quote, legitimate concern, but with the texture thing, if you're complaining about the textures in any video game, really, that always seemed like a strange thing to complain about for me, because you go back and play something like Ocarina of Time, objectively, those textures look like garbage. They look like mangled, like literally like mangled garbage spread over an N64, you know, model at times. But it doesn't matter. Like, the game is still really amazing, regardless of the fact that the textures, you know, quote unquote, look bad. So to complain about it in a setting like this, I mean, we've had games with textures that are way more tenuous than the ones that we saw in this Zelda trailer. So it seems weird that you would complain about something like that. But like I said, this is a really tech-focused audience in a lot of ways, or we assume it is with the Video Game Awards. So I don't know, maybe that's why some of that's coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah,
in a way.
I'm not really worried too much about it right now, because they still probably have like another year or so on development. And
no, but they're probably not going to fix those ugly textures, and no one's going to care when you're playing the game. It doesn't matter at all. It's going to have no bearing whatsoever on how enjoyable the game is.
Mm-hmm.
When you're complaining about stuff like that, there's such a focus on something that it's worth talking about in a certain way. Like if you want to discuss technical development in video games from 1980 to, you know, 2020 or whatever, you could talk about that. But in terms of how fun the game's going to be, is an ugly texture really going to ruin it? You know what I mean? As long as it's consistent in quality and in style, it's not going to have any bearing whatsoever. They could keep it look exactly like what we saw, and I think by the time you played it, no one's going to care. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very true.
That's really what I just mean by it's strange to me. But I understand, there is a bit of it's kind of fun to see something that just looks really beyond anything you've seen before. So, like with the Uncharted trailer that came today, there's a little bit of like, whoa, like that's a video game? It's kind of cool. But once you're actually playing the game, it's not going to matter.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's move on to some of the gameplay details, I guess. And
yes, yeah.
We did see some things with the Gamepad. We saw some things with Epona. So we saw a bunch of different things.
And they called her Epona.
Yeah.
They didn't call her Epona.
Yeah.
They said Epona. So now we know.
Do you want to talk about the Gamepad stuff just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the only things we really saw were like aiming stuff.
Yeah,
with
I was
the
going to mention the aiming.
I mean, the map and stuff, but the aiming stuff, it looks like it's still early. Like it looks a little bit rough and jaggy, as Nintendo tech demos tend to. But we've had how many games where the gyroscope aiming is fine, so that's not worth worrying about. I think it'll be good if they let you use the stick and the gyroscope at the same time. That's always worked for them in the past with like Ocarina of Time 3D. I thought that was a really good choice. So hopefully that's where they go with this. I'm sure it will be.
Yeah, and you can also set waypoints on the gamepad.
Sure, yeah, and that's kind of interesting, right? Because it's not like in Skyward Sword where you set it on a map in like a top-down way. Maybe you can, but the way they showed was you point I guess it's the gamepad in this case, but you point the reticle at a point on the 3D world, and then it will appear on the map. So that would mean that you can't set a waypoint for somewhere that you can't see, which means that the design they're choosing they said they're going to put a lot of high-up points, not only is going to help with just the wonder and the spectacle of the world, but that's actually going to be sort of a gameplay mechanic in the sense of, well, I want to go behind that mountain, but I don't know how to get there, so maybe if I can find a way to set a waypoint, but to set a waypoint, you'll have to get to a point where you can actually see that. You can't just do it, if you're standing on the opposite side of a wall. They might just have you be able to set waypoints on the map, I don't know. But the way they showed it was you had to see the location in the 3D environment in order to set it on the map. So that was at least a little bit interesting, I suppose.
Yeah, and we can move on to Epona a little bit more, since I think they probably showed maybe the most there.
Yep.
And she can move automatically, and then you could do things like swing your sword and aim and move the camera around.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the biggest thing with this is that it's going to be good for shooting arrows. And it's weird that no one's really thought of this before, because it's never really an issue swinging the camera and moving Epona around. That's never been a problem. In the only game that it's been in, I suppose, would be Twilight Princess on the GameCube. But in other games, like Red Dead Redemption, or even if you can equate it to like driving in an open world game, it's never really an issue driving and moving the camera at the same time. But aiming your arrows and moving a vehicle at the same time, that's something that would actually be doable when it was difficult in Ocarina of Time to do that. So it'll be really cool to see, to be able to do that, I think, for the first time. Because like I said, in Ocarina of Time, aiming your arrows while on Epona was rather difficult unless you were Z-targeting. So if you can just say, hey, Epona, run straight and don't hit anything, and you can just look around and shoot stuff, that also is going to feed into the wonder and the immersion of that really big world. So it sounds like they're thinking about that stuff at least.
Yeah, and Epona will also avoid hitting trees, they said.
Exactly. So that's really, you can just say, go this way, and then she'll do it. I mean, what is that really going to change about the game? Probably not that much, but it's a nice touch that they're thinking about that kind of design that other companies have dealt with and not come to that conclusion. So it's those little touches that tell you EAD Tokyo's making this and not, some other game. A studio that has a focus on the playing of the game more than the world or the story is making this game, rather than who we're used to making open world games. So that's nice.
I think the only other tidbit we learned about Epona is that you can jump off her and do this like dismount, and then it
Yeah.
goes into slow motion. And you can
You
shoot
can
an
do the
arrow.
Max Payne like diving and the Matrix style,
That looks pretty
Um,
cool, I think.
it's always been cool in games that they've had that kind of stuff. Like the slow motion shooting, I think is a really it's always been a really kind of visceral way of combating enemies. So I'm fine with them having something similar in this. Um, I think it's gonna. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think most of what it's gonna add is just sort of a visceral, like, yeah, I'm really cool kind of thing when you're shooting, you're jumping off your opponent and doing these sort of Matrix style jumps and leaps and things. So most of what it's going to add is mostly, what's the word? Not superficial, but it's mostly like aesthetic. It's not really changing the gameplay itself, but it's cool. It looks really, really fun to do that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's I can't complain about that.
Was there anything else that we saw? I think we know that you kind of hear a metallic sound when you hit an enemy properly or something.
I mean, there's always some sort of sound in a Zelda game, some placeholder for that. Either it's a metallic sound or like an orchestral chord, as in Wind Waker. I think Twilight Princess had a little orchestra hit as well. So.
Oh, and Link can eat apples.
He can. Well, and that's an interesting thing, right? Because people complained about the world feeling pretty empty, and I don't disagree. But there are two things that either lead you to believe it's not as empty as they say, or that won't matter. And one of them is they mentioned how there's a lot of wildlife, birds and insects, and the apples can grow, and then sometimes they'll be there and sometimes they won't. So the world theoretically will evolve organically. Whether that pans out is yet to be seen. But if it does, that might get rid of some of that sense that it's not a real place. But also, if you think back to the pacing of the very original Legend of Zelda, which has been cited as an inspiration for this, a lot of that game was wandering around for a really long time through an empty world until you get these spikes in action, and then you probably die because that game's really hard, and then you do it again. So the pacing of this game might end up being more similar to that, where it's a lot of just wandering around looking at the world with these spikes and really intense action, rather than something that's more consistent. And that works better in a 3D environment than on the NES because there's more to look at just inherently. There's more architecture. There's more of a world to feast your eyes on. So, I mean, that having it be empty won't necessarily ruin the game. You know what I mean? Wind Waker sort of plays into that same thing, right? There's just a lot to look at in Wind Waker, so it works there. And so all they have to do is hit that balance. And how many times have they hit that balance before? 1, 2, 3, 4, a handful of times. They've done it before. So yeah, I guess the only game that they didn't really hit that balance, you would maybe say, aside from the handheld ones, would be something like Skyward Sword. Well, Majora's Mask, not either, really. Majora's Mask and Skyward Sword. But I don't necessarily think that the world being quote-unquote barren is an issue. I think it was maybe more of an issue in Twilight Princess because that world was not only barren, but really segmented, so you couldn't really get your head around it being one really big world in certain ways. But no, I wouldn't be so quick to jump on the anti-barren world train just yet, because you kind of have to trust EAD Tokyo, because they've done it so many times before. The chances they'd screw it up are like 1,000,000 to 1. Or maybe 1 to 1,000,000. I don't know. However you say that.
Yeah, right now I have very high hopes for this game based on like the art style, what we've seen, the overworld, and just how beautiful it looks, and just like the little touches about how Link can eat apples. So they're just. I feel like
you go ahead.
No, I feel like there's a lot of potential just with the little thing that they've showed so far, because there's still so much that they haven't shown.
Right, but you do also have to remember that saying that the apples grow on trees and that you can eat the apples, that's the kind of thing that companies really like to put forth before games come out. This happens a lot with a fellow that everybody knows called Peter Molyneux. That's the kind of stuff that companies like to throw out there before release to get you hyped up for the idea of an organic world. And numerous times, in fact, I think very few times has it actually ended up panning out. So I would be a little skeptical of that claim, less skeptical than if it wasn't Nintendo, but I'm a little skeptical of this idea that the world will be completely organically evolving, if only because we've actually never really seen that happen before. So if they nail it, that'll be great, but they've never done that before. So that's something that I'm not as certain that they will hit. Not like the open world or the art style or the combat, which you can pretty much say that's a shoo-in for all being really great. That little touch is something I'm not as certain about.
Everything else, though, I'm guessing are pretty hopeful for, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the game, there's almost no doubt that the game, even if they completely screw up the whole organic world thing, I really doubt it will have any bearing on the quality of the game. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's very little doubt in my mind that the game will turn out to be really, really good. What we saw in the trailer doesn't really change. Well, I guess, again, the art style is the one thing that changes my excitement level. But the rest of the stuff is just like, okay, well, it looks like an early Zelda game, how they've always looked. So still, for me, the thing that's most exciting is just the people who are making it, rather than what we've seen aside from the art style. Because what we've seen has just been, okay, yeah, could be good, could be bad kind of thing. I'll just trust the team. The team will know how to do it. So for me anyway, like, it's good to see that it's coming along. The biggest revelation is that they doubled down on a 2015 release date.
Yeah.
That was the thing that I think was most exciting for me, rather than anything that we necessarily saw in the trailer, which it looks good, but, it's supposed to look good. It's not, nothing in it was mind-blowing. But the fact that they doubled down on that 2015 release is, they can't delay it now, right? They've said it twice.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all I was at least expecting them to delay it into 2016. I was certain that they were going to do that.
I was right with you there.
But man, if they double down on it, they can't as easily pull out of that. You know what I mean? You can't just say that twice and then say never mind, because it would be really bad. It would be really bad for your public image. And then the fact that they said Star Fox is coming before this next year.
Yeah.
Is
bombs
like,
were dropped.
What? How are they going to do? Like, that's amazing, because we haven't seen anything of Star Fox. Star Fox that thing does not exist as far as the public is concerned.
That was almost more shocking than the fact that Zelda's still on track for 2015.
Both of those things are mind-blowing to me. I was certain that they would get Star Fox out in the holiday and then have to delay Zelda until, summer of 2016. But no, they said 2015. They said they are sure. They said, don't worry about it. Well, the translators said that.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, yeah, don't worry about it. We're going to get this. So, all right. All the best. All of my favorite Zelda games were the ones that had to be rushed. So, great. Let's do it again, as far as I'm concerned.
When you think about it, right now, Wii U could end up having one of the best years ever for a console, because there's so much planned for it right now.
2015 looks really good for Wii U. And after the quality of the games in 2014 was very good, but the amount of releases was pretty terrible as far as I'm concerned. We had, Mario Kart, and then we had to wait 4 or 5 months before the next game came out. Next year looks like not only will the quality be good, but we're going to have a crap load of them, especially if Zelda and Star Fox both make it out.
Yep.
That's crazy. That's like Mario Maker, Kirby, Yoshi, Splatoon, Zelda, Star Fox, theoretically Shin Megami, whatever thing. That's
Xenoblade Chronicles X.
Xenoblade Chronicles X. It's like, what? How do you have this many games? It's crazy.
Yeah,
It is really, really crazy.
I'm getting hyped just thinking about it.
2015 looks like it's going to be really, really good. And again, the only 2 games of that bunch that were at risk of being delayed were Zelda and Star Fox, which they've both doubled down on and said that they are coming out. So pretty much that whole bunch is confirmed for 2015, I think, at this point. Of course, I also said that Zelda was 2016, and it's not. I've been wrong before. But it looks pretty good. It looks like a pretty great year. And Smash is going to last me until whatever the next game that comes out is. So it's
Kirby's in January.
Kirby's going to be an interesting one. People told me the Canvas Curse was awesome. So Kirby will be a fun one to watch. Captain Toad has been really good too, I suppose. That's not worth ignoring either. But like Yoshi and Mario Maker, Kirby, all of the early year stuff are, what you would call lighter titles, with the exception of maybe Splatoon, depending on how the multiplayer pans out in that. But the whole year bunched together, you've got 3 what are theoretically huge games, Star Fox, Xenoblade, and Zelda, all coming out in the same year. And we haven't had a year like that with Nintendo since, like, when was the last time we had, like 2008, maybe? When it was Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, wait, no, Galaxy was 2007. I don't know when the last year was.
Yeah, it's been very long.
That we had this kind of potential for like a huge year. So I'm pretty excited. This is it's a very, very exciting time, and man, the Wii U is just so great. That's all. That's really all that I need to say. Is just the Wii U is really great. It has so many great games, and 2015 is going to make it even better. So, yeah, good on them for stealth announcing some more Zelda stuff.
And
not stealth announcing, but surprise announcing, I suppose.
And since you brought up Mario Maker, I may as well just quickly mention that we have 2 new styles confirmed for that, which is Super Mario Brothers World. No,
Super Mario Brothers World.
It's been a long day. Super Mario Brothers 3 and World. Right?
Which it's good that they're doing that, right? The physics will stay the same, but to be able to pick your art style that's definitely a good thing. So that's going to be a fun game too. I'll be interested to see how that ends up panning out, if it's going to have like a Little Big Planet kind of community supporting it online. Because if it does, in theory, you have infinite Mario to play forever. You know what I mean? Because you'll just have level after level after level to download from some like community server. So even if you're not making any levels, that's a pretty promising proposition. So
I have a feeling I'd be one of those people who would just download the levels because I have no creativity.
Well, that's usually what happens with that kind of game, right? Like 1% of the audience creates the content for the other 99% to devour. Everybody makes 1 or 2 levels, and then most people say, I'm terrible at this. Let's let other people do it.
Yep.
And then they do. And so the same thing goes with like Smash Brothers custom levels. I made 3. 2 of them were attempting to recreate Corneria from Melee. And one of them was just like a junk level. So and now I'm just going to let other people make the good levels because I don't have the patience for it, I suppose. And that's probably how Mario Maker is going to end up. But the Mario formula for a game is really perfect for just going on, downloading a level, and playing through it, because platforming is such an accessible genre, so it's really perfect for that style of game.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, things are looking very promising for the Wii right now.
Absolutely, and they jumped in right before Sony's little Sony convention, which was funny. I always like when companies kind of have to, they go at each other, like Nintendo comes out and announces this new Zelda trailer and this Mario Maker and Star Fox, and so the internet's talking about that, and then Sony comes out the next day and it's like, oh, Uncharted trailer, and it's like this fun little push and pull of seeing like who gets the mind share, because all that stuff is intentional to a point, and it makes me laugh. I like watching that. Either way, the games will be great, so whatever the companies do in the meantime is just for my amusement.
Yeah, and admittedly, Nintendo stole the show last night.
They did, yeah, and that's crazy, because that is not their venue, you know what I mean? That is not where we're used to seeing.
And I mean, Microsoft didn't even bring anything, so Nintendo had 3 trailers, which is crazy.
Microsoft is having a rough time. I didn't expect any trailers from Nintendo. I didn't expect them to win anything, well, except like racing, where they're the only real contender, and best Wii U game, because obviously, Microsoft can't win that. But yeah, they really came out as hard as someone like, Activision or EA has at the past in this kind of show. So, very impressed. That was a good move, I think, on their part. I think they made the right choice, and all the people who say that Zelda looks stupid can shut their mouths because they are not talking from a place of reason. They need to be taken away and taught a lesson.
Yeah, and hopefully Nintendo will continue its presence in this kind of fashion in the future.
Well, as long as they are continuously trailing behind, I think that they will. But as we saw, as soon as they get a leg up, they relax and they try and hammer what's making them. I mean, that's what the whole Wii era was, that sort of thing. They didn't show their face at a single one of these events. So again, this is why I like watching Nintendo work from behind, because they do what I see as their most inspired work every single time when they're, working to get back. I mean, this has been the worst one of all the times they've been behind. But I love Nintendo when they're backed into a corner. They're so good. They pull out all the stops. They make their teams work really hard, and they don't let their teams delay stuff. And I think that in the end works in their favor.
Yep, so good stuff at the award show, good stuff coming up for Wii U, and things are looking good right now.
Yep, absolutely. I'm very excited to continue playing with the best console right now, which is the Wii U. So,
Alright, so I think we will wrap things up then.
yep, that's fine with me.
Alright, thank you all for listening so much, and we will be back sometime soon with another Just a Chat.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye, guys.